How's it going, guys? It's the TheSpaceWizard here, and I'm checking out this article talking about George Lucas's Star Wars Underworld series, because everybody else on the internet wants to talk about this right now, so I thought I'd put my 2 cents into the pot and kind of let you guys know what I'm thinking about it. So, George Lucas's Star Wars series cost $40 million an episode. Wow, that's mind-blowing, and would have blown up the franchise. Disney would have never bought Lucasfilm if it got made. I think that's false. I think Disney still would have bought Lucasfilm if the opportunity was available, because Disney likes to make money. George Lucas wanted to make money, so the sale probably still could have happened. George Lucas's Star Wars producers Rick McCallum recently appeared on an episode of Young Indie Chronicles podcast and teased that would have been Star Wars Underworld, an ambitious television series that was one of the last Star Wars projects Lucas was working on before he sold the franchise in Disney in 2012 for $4.05 billion. I'm skipping lines. The series was set between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and would have acted as a bridge from the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy, the latter of which McCallum produced. So first and foremost, whatever Star Wars Underworld was going to premiere as its TV show probably would have decanonized the EU. Let's face it, a lot of people already get upset who are EU loyalists when we talk about Star Wars The Clone Wars 2003 or Star Wars The Clone Wars 2008 series and how it changed EU original lore, which the EU was never original lore, it's just expanded upon the original lore of Star Wars, which is the films. I think we had over 60 scripts, like third draft scripts, McCallum said. Noted, they brought the most wonderful writers in to the world, to Lucas's Skywalker's Ranch to map and pen out the series. These were dark scripts. They were sexy. They were violent. They were absolutely wonderful, complicated, challenging scripts that all cost like $40 million an episode. Now, I went ahead and I did some deep digging. I got some notes. So according to my notes, we're going to be looking at the cost of Disney Star Wars' series and basically determine that whole thing about $40 million an episode really isn't that impossible to do. Because when you break down Mandalorian costs maybe about $15 million per episode for 24 episodes. You got Ahsoka, which has 8 episodes, that the total cost was projected to be about $100 million for the 8 episodes. Kenobi cost you about $90 million for 6 episodes. The Acolyte had 8 episodes, which cost an estimated between $180 million to $230 million. And then for the total cost of Andor's 2 seasons, you have $645 million. Now, to put that into a perspective and general reference, we can go to George Lucas's TV series for Star Wars The Clone Wars, both 2003 and 2008. Both of these shows are at an estimated cost of about $8 million. However, there is one key factor I'm avoiding when I'm spouting all these numbers. Disney doesn't focus on the same things that George Lucas focused on. Disney doesn't really focus on merchandising. George Lucas made a lot of money from merchandising. So when we're talking about figurative costs for producing these series, there's all sorts of different numbers that we can interpret could also affect the gross income that these series can deliver to their creators. Now, McCallum stopped short of providing plot details for Star Wars Underworld, but said the series would have blown up the whole Star Wars universe, and Disney would have definitely never offered George to buy the franchise. Does McCallum know that Star Wars is for children? You know, you're describing dark, sexy, and all this stuff, and Star Wars itself already has these tones written into their original movies. A lot of people goes over the head. You know, a lot of the people who hate the prequels, it goes over their head, just like this. They miss out on all those darker, sexier tones, especially in like Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. It's a little bit darker, a little bit sexier. But ultimately, even though these themes are represented within these adult characters in these movies already, that's not going to stop Disney from purchasing this franchise. Because, let's face it, I've seen a lot of Disney movies that have a lot of sexual themes in them. That's just me calling the kettle black. The producer said not making Underworld remains one of the greatest disappointments of our lives, adding, "The problem was each episode was bigger than the films, so the lowest I could get it down to with the tech that existed then was $40 million an episode." The series effectively died when Disney purchased Lucasfilm and Lucas exited his post at the company. Kathleen Kennedy, who joined Lucasfilm in 2012 as co-chair alongside Lucas, was named company president after Disney's acquisition. She'd bring Star Wars to television years later with projects such as The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Skeleton Crew, and more. Kennedy also shepherded a sequel film trilogy that included The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Return of the Jedi. Return of Skywalker. The fuck is Return of Skywalker? You mean The Rise of Skywalker? That just threw me for a whole loop. Variety, get your shit together, bro. What the hell? Zach Sharf, I'm on your ass. You don't know your Star Wars movies. Return of Skywalker. That fucking joke. Get out of here. Anyway, back on topic. So, this Star Wars show that reportedly cost $40 million out of the picture. So, we can see that there's always opportunity to have these shows made and delivered. I mean, we had Mando, Ahsoka, Kenobi, Acolyte, Andor Season 2, Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars Clone Wars. We have all these other different shows that already exist. But yet this show was out of reach because of the cost of $40 million an episode. It's mockable. I don't want to say mockable because people are going to take that the wrong way, but it could have been done. And it's like I always kind of come back to the idea of, Lucas was already involved in working on that new sequel trilogy of his that he wanted more direct say-so over that he didn't get. And that already kind of gave his mindset on where Star Wars was existing at that time. It was his ideology, his world. And so we already seen that come to fruition through the original trilogy, through the prequels, through Clone Wars 2003, 2008. We already had, a figurative mindset of where Lucas wanted the general storytelling to go. Even in the concept arts for his sequel trilogy, we already know that his thought process was not on the same thought process as all the authors that created the expanded universe under his note-taking. And given that George Lucas was a marketing genius when it comes to selling countless different merchandising rights for Star Wars stuff throughout the generations of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, that's one of the biggest methods that Star Wars could utilize at that moment to make money. And I mean, Disney doesn't really utilize that like George Lucas did in the early 2000s, where the toy aisles were full theme Star Wars, where you have action figures of almost every single character, different lightsabers, different cool things that you could purchase. Now you just really get kind of limited items to select from, or you can get thematic merch when you go to the big event parks like Disney World and stuff like that. Actually, if I was a child growing up in 2025 and I was a child that loved Star Wars with a very heavy-hearted passion like I did growing up, I would be very disappointed, because as an adult, I'm very disappointed that I can't take my kids down the toy aisle and be like, look at this glorious wall of toys. Instead, I can pull up a picture from the early 2000s and be like, ha, we had it better. Your guys' toy aisle sucks. But what effectively really ended this Star Wars series? Was it the sale to Disney? Was it the cost of the project? Was it that George Lucas's wife was just about to have another kid and it takes 10 years to really get a trilogy off the ground, and he didn't want to invest 10 years into movie making again and then 10 years into not really being with his family? I mean, that kind of makes sense. I'd rather be with my family than appease the general population. However, the obscure details really don't mean anything in 2025, actually. When it comes down to, initiative. Could it have been created? Absolutely. Could we have enjoyed this series? Absolutely, or absolutely not. I mean, we've seen this fandom. They either hate what George makes or they love what George makes. Hell, half the fandom promotes Star Wars that isn't even created by George Lucas, just based on his notes of what Star Wars is. They enjoyed those author stories. Actually, it does no good sitting here talking about a dead series that'll never see the light of day. Because as I stated, what it really boils down to is initiative. And Lucasfilm in their late years of the company owned by George Lucas, lacked initiative. If you want to create something, create it. Disney obviously did it in 10 years. George Lucas could have did it too.